So at the end of last winter, I was lucky enough to score my local beach at a solid size, and being sort of one of the bigger days I've seen there, a lot of people ask me sort of like, how did you even get out there? And, you know, and what was it like taking a bit of a kicking off of the surf when it gets that big? I thought I'd answer a couple of those questions. The main thing is knowing your environment. So it's a lot easier moving out of your comfort zone, say with the size of the surf, if you know the place you're going to surf really well. So like you know where the rocks are, you know where the sand is, and all of that. And the place I was surfing, it was a beach break. So it's nice to know that if I hit the bottom, it is going to be sand. But sometimes hitting wet, compact sand is a bit like hitting concrete. But it just, at least it's smooth, isn't it? If you're going out to a new spot, if you've got your shit together, then you already know the layout. Because one of the main things is watching the big sets when they come in and knowing where they're going to break first and where they're going to break last. Because when you time your paddle out in bigger surf, you want to know that the channel you're paddling out in is the channel, and you're not paddling out in between a set. But when a set comes in, the waves are going to break right in front of you. So you want to edge your bets. And one of the main ones is knowing where the fire exit is, because it's easy enough to, you know, sort of paddle off out into the surf, and all of a sudden you realize it's bigger than you thought it was, and you end up just getting caught by sets and even the inside waves. You want to know where that water's displacing. It's a bit like being at school, isn't it? They do a fire drill. It's like, right, to the fire exits. Well, you want to know where that is, because you are basically walking into a burning building. Next ones are sort of pretty standard. A lot of, especially sort of if you're based in the UK, which isn't notorious as a big wave spot, it's easy when the surf gets big just to think, and just go out on your normal board. But you got to think, once it hits a certain size, you are going to want a bigger board. You see the guys and girls out there surfing sort of 20, 30 foot plus. They're not riding boards that they can duck dive thinking, it's all right because it'll get me under the wave easier. It's like, are they? They're riding bigger boards that, even like Eskimo rolls and stuff, tends to go out the window once the surf gets to a certain size. The big day I surfed last winter, I just went out on an 8-foot Mao because I knew it would have the volume to get me into the waves. And I knew, like I say, even if I had a gun designed for it or whatever, I'm not duck diving that. It's too much volume. I know you do get top professional longboarders and stuff, and they can duck dive their longboards, but a lot of them are quite thin on the rails. But when you're riding a bigger, thicker board, it's a lot harder to get that under the water. So you just got to know that you're going to bail, and by having a much thicker board, there's a lot less chance of it snapping. And the other one is your leash. A lot of people will get their bigger board and then just sort of transfer the sort of smaller leash onto it. And it's like, if the surf's got big enough that you're going to ride a step-up board, that even if your step-up board's only a sort of few inches longer, but it's a lot thicker, the fact that you're taking it into bigger waves, you're going to want to get yourself a much longer leash. So like this beefed up 6'6" I've got here, it's still got like, well, what used to be an 8-foot leash, but after the big day last winter, it's more like a 10-foot leash. But the other trick is also making sure things like your leash string is good and working. You're not putting something on that's frayed, because like I say, you want the longer leash, because you know when you bail, you want that board to go away from you, and you want it to stay on the end and attached to your leg. Whereas if you put it on a short leash, it will just put too much tension on it and it'll just snap straight away. And you're going to want a bigger board, because when you're paddling out, if you've timed it right on where the waves are breaking first, where the waves are breaking last, you're going to want to make that little window of time that you've got in between the sets really count. And that's why having the bigger board allows you to cover a greater distance, because you're on a bigger playing field. So a bigger board will give you a better radius. You'll be able to get a greater distance in a much shorter space of time. And also too, when you're taking off on bigger waves, there's so much water coming up the face of that wave that you need something that's going to get you in nice and early, so you're not getting pitched. Same if there's any wind or anything. That's why sometimes if you get you've got your step-up board, you want it to be a lot thicker and quite often a little bit heavier, so it actually get itself down that face and not get caught up. But yeah, a bigger board for bigger waves is a must, really, if you're wanting to push your comfort zone. And I suppose the other thing with surfing bigger waves is knowing you're going to get a kick in. At some point, inevitably, you know, you might take off on a wave and all of a sudden it drops a section, you can't get round it or something, or you blow the takeoff and you're going to come up and you're going to have a couple more on the head.
Fail technique! Bell technique coming in very handy today. Yeah! Good day at the seaside. Oh, look what's coming. Lovely! Cornflakes for breakfast! Yeah!
So inevitably, you know you're going to get a kick in. But what you want to remember is when you're taking a beating, it quite often doesn't actually go on as long as you think. You hear people saying, oh, it's held down for like 30, 40 seconds. And it's like, well, quite often on bigger waves, you're not actually held down for that long. You quite often find, like when I was going through a bit of footage, I noticed once I actually, if I bailed, went under the water, I was back up again within sort of 7, 8 seconds. But you quite often will then only have another 7, 8 seconds before the next wave inevitably lands on your head. So it's knowing that you're going to get a good kick in, but you'll generally surface pretty quickly. What you've got to be prepared for is the fact that when you come up, you might have to go back down again and just keep riding it out. And that's where, if you know where your fire exit is, you know you can kind of remain calm if you know where you're being washed to while these kick-ins are going on. Whereas if you know you're going to be getting washed in by rocks, do you know those rocks well enough that if you wash in around there, you know where you can grapple on and get out? Because it's, if you get caught out, which if you're pushing your comfort zone with surfing in bigger waves, at some point you are going to get caught out. And it's knowing how to stay calm and relax and know what's happening, rather than freaking out and so all of a sudden you look up and you're in by some rocks that you don't even know where you are. Then it's going to get quite traumatic. So the trick is know your fire exit. Know that while you're getting that kick in, you're just washing further down the bay into, you know, onto the beach or where you're going. And then it allows you just to deal with the inevitable kick in that you're going through. So I remember once when I was out in Morocco, I went out on a bigger day and I got to one of the point breaks, jumped off one of the jump off rocks, and it was my own fault because I was on too small a board and I didn't manage to get far enough out before the sets come marching around the corner. So I thought I was going to make it, and I made the mistake of trying to sort of paddle up the point a bit too soon, whereas I should have jumped in and paddled down the point to get me away from the waves and give me a bit more chance to get out into the channel. But I tried to take a little bit of a shortcut, and then all of a sudden I saw this thing come round the corner and I was like, oh my God, I am going to die. That wave in particular, I thought it was going to land on me, but I managed to just get under it, but I didn't even try and duck dive. I still just remember getting under the lip, sliding my board out and just swimming through the face of it. And I got away from that one pretty unscathed. Well, not emotionally, but the wave behind it was, yeah, twice the size, had already broken and just whoof, ripped me down the point. But before I jumped in, I remember thinking, well, if I get caught, there is a beach about 2 kilometers down that way. So worst case scenario. And then sure enough, yeah, didn't make the paddle out, got clipped. Every now and then there'd be a little lull in the sets and I thought, whoa, fuck, I can get out there, I can get out there. And then bang, get clipped again. And in the end, I did actually wash into the beach. I think past a couple of beginners on softboards going, hey, you all right? And I was like, yeah, it wasn't one of my greatest moments, but I remember not feeling too bad, like a bit humiliated from the kicking and not being able to get out there, but I knew where I was going. I knew I was floating down that point and I was just going to inevitably end up on a beach and would be able to walk out and make the long, sorry ass walk back up to where my car was parked. But yeah, if you're going out in bigger waves, one, know where those waves are breaking first, where they're breaking last, and where the fire exit is. Go out on a bigger board and get a much bigger, longer, thicker leash because you're gonna need it, and check it's in good working order and the string's all good, and yes. And that's why when it's bigger, you never want to be paddling out behind anyone. To be fair, you never want to be paddling out behind anyone anyway, because you never know whether what seems quite small or mediocre to you is actually out of somebody else's comfort zone, and the person in front isn't going to absolutely panic and bail their board. So yeah, never paddle out behind anyone, unless they're hot. But know your fire exit, people. Know your fire exit. God, that went on. The best way to describe the beating that you get off of bigger waves is kind of imagine you're being put in an industrial-sized washing machine and being put on full spin for about 8 to 10 seconds while wrestling with an alligator. Have a quick breath and then do it again.
Should I Weetabix?